Welcome to TPM. This is our kickoff to talk details about what's happening here at Maersk and APM Terminals. So thank you again for joining us tonight. I think it's fantastic that the JOC theme this year is finding reliability in an unreliable world. Well, that couldn't be a more perfect theme for what we're talking about tonight in terms of how we are bringing reliability to ocean shipping overall. For years, reliability has been an issue for customers and disruption has ruled the seas, right? Well, we all know that really well. But the challenge is that the current network designs, it makes delays almost inevitable. Well, the solution, a hero emerges, Gemini, okay? To introduce leaner loops, strategic hubs, and controlled operations to eliminate bottlenecks, keep cargo moving perfectly. All right, so the happy ending, of course, that's what we're all looking for, the happy ending. Same market coverage, more efficiency, and most importantly, predictability you can trust. I know that sounds like an infomercial, that's okay. Lars Michael Jensen, he's been with APM Maersk for 43 years, and he has led the way for global network strategy. He's overseen the trans-Pacific trade, the transatlantic trade. He helped integrate Hamburg Süd into our operations. And he is head of hubs, playing a key role in designing the APM Terminals hub backbone that's going to support the network of the future, which is actually the network of today. And also, Michael Britton, who leads North America Ocean Products. He's had his fingers on the pulse of global trade for over 25 years. And he led Hamburg Süd's Asia Pacific business. He also served as CEO of Sealand Americas. And since the 2023, as I said, he's head of NAM, Ocean Products. So these are my leading men. We're gonna talk a little bit about what we're here to do and what to show you, and then they'll be open for Q&A. So Lars, I'll leave it off to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. The state of reliability today. So I was asked to speak a little bit about what was actually the thoughts behind the changes that we're making for the new network. Ocean networks haven't changed a lot, at least the design of them, over many years. When I started in this business, I was almost about to say 100 years ago, but you just stole that one. My first job when I joined as a young, hopeful guy, was to actually, stample some schedules, paper schedules together. And it was like this port, this port, this port, this port, and this port, and then back again. The good thing was it was in different colors depending on what trade it was. But it was still the same, and it has still been the same until now. If anything has happened, more ports, bigger ships take longer. And I know I come from APMT, but in some cases, actually, the terminals also became the trouble and the bottleneck. We've had bad weather, worse weather, I'd say, in those many years. So what did we do? We have changed our network many times, and every time we basically come back to the same issue. So what we're trying to illustrate on this graph here is actually developments of official schedule reliability over the years. And many times we've tried, based on the same principles, okay, so what do? We go a little slower on steaming, then everything will be okay. We add an extra port, nobody will notice. And so on and so forth, because we need the extra ports to actually fill the ships. But the thing is that it didn't really change. We've had some glory moments back in, when was this, 2019, where we were up reasonably on reliability. But then all kinds of casinos, from Ever Given in the Suez Canal to Corona to whatever, things happen all the time. So we basically came to the conclusion that something had to change. If we continue in the same way of redesigning the way we've done networks for many years, we will still end up with the same problems. And we would not be solving that reliability issue that all of us so desperately want to do, or want to solve rather. So what did we do? We looked through a number of things. So we started to look at this. This is not something we worked out at the coffee machine on a Friday afternoon a couple of weeks ago. We actually worked on this here for quite a while. 5 years to be exact. We decided that we want to go and try to look at things in a different way. Reliability is what we're trying to solve for. So we looked at what are the issues. Issues is often nowadays around the port calls. So is adding more port calls to a rotation, is that the solution? We thought not. We then saw, okay, we actually need different tools compared to what we have today. And maybe what we should do is that we should have less calls on a rotation. Normally, at least when I speak in Europe, I talk about the tube system in London. And I don't know how many has been to London. And there is one of my favorites, the Circle Line, the yellow line that just goes around and around. And then when there is a problem at Liverpool Street Station or at Cannon Street stations, those that want to get on that Circle Line in Kensington, they can wait and they can wait and they can wait because the train ain't coming there until 20 minutes later. And it's a little bit the same when you have a schedule like this that goes to many ports. So we decided that we would try to design something, see how it could work if we had less ports on a rotation. So what do we do with the rest? Well, the rest, maybe we should start to look at using the network more integrated compared to what we did in the past. Because in the past, you had one loop that was sailing around, you had some feeders at the edges and so on. When it came out to the end of the schedules, it was half utilized. That is not good for CO2 emission when you look at how much CO2 you actually spend per box if you have a half-empty ship sailing at the shoulders. So we said maybe what we do is that we sail between fewer terminals, we sail between fewer ports, and then we cover the rest on dedicated shuttles that goes down to some hubs where those are located and where they actually make sense to do. But another thing we did as well was that we said, if you have two ocean loops, two mainline or long-haul loops, why do they actually have to call the same 5 ports at one end before they go to the other? So why don't we start to think the terminals and the ocean loops into the same thing? So you have some main loops that goes to these 2 ports, another one that comes from these 2. They meet somewhere, and then they can distribute it again. So those were some of the things that we were looking at. What we can also do on this here is that we can isolate the issues. So why should a shipper that ships out of Busan or an importer that takes cargo out of Busan, why should that Busan cargo be delayed just because there is fog in Ningbo? Which there is on occasion. So if we actually do this, that we call less ports on the rotations, we still cover the remaining ports into the mainliners, use the various mainliners to connect to each other, you can actually isolate the problem. So if there is a problem in Busan or if there is a problem in Ningbo, then we say, okay, the rest of the network can still sail because we cover those we call them shuttles, and some of them is actually almost like a ferry, that it just goes between 2 ports. It's probably the leanest loop that you can ever have if there's only 2 ports. Load, discharge, load, discharge. That's what you do. So these are the things that we looked to do. And then there's also, and I realized that on the Pacific, you can say, well, there's not necessarily that many hubs if you only go to one port, like down here at the Pier 400. There's not a heck of a lot to hop around that. That is true. So when we then looked at particularly a Pacific network, to some degree also an Atlantic network, we looked and say, okay, we got to look at this to try to bring in more reliability for those. What do we do? So if we don't use hubs, then what we can do is that we can actually try to again have less calls on a loop, or maybe to add some ships to the loop, so that we either on average have less calls per loop, or we are sailing a shorter distance per loop. That obviously has some consequences, but you get to that trade-off where we, in the search for the reliability, the problem that we were trying to solve for, we're kind of saying, okay, maybe we don't need 5 departures every week out of Shanghai. Maybe we could actually do with 2. Maybe we don't need the last 2 or 3 days of transit times. We are okay that it takes a couple of days more. But when we do that, we then also increase the ability to actually be there on schedule, on time, as we all are looking for. Because from a selfish perspective, when the ships are actually coming on time, I know from a customer perspective, it's bloody irritating if the ship is 3 days late. Having moved from ocean to terminals a couple of years back, I can also say from a terminal perspective, it's very irritating when the ship is not arriving when it was supposed to arrive, because it makes your operation inefficient, it makes it costly. So some would say, well, now you are just adding some more ships, you are doing more transshipments and so on, that's going to cost money. But the whole calculation and the whole theory around this is that with the higher reliability, we can also serve more efficiently and thereby also serve it at, how can I say, at a competitive cost. So we're adding cost in one sense, but we're actually reducing elsewhere. And then the thing that is probably underestimated in all of this, the way we've designed the network, we've designed it so that we have the right ship sizes to pretty much sail highly utilized all around. So if you have a 15,000 TEU ship that comes to Shanghai, that rotates up in Bohai and is only half full, as I said earlier, CO2 emission per box carried is not the best in the world. Now we fill the ship with the 15,000 TEUs from Shanghai, from Ningbo, with fewer sailings because we just reduced the number of calls in those two ports. But the ship is full. And then we right-size the ships that go into Bohai to connect the boxes up there to the capacity that is needed. So with that, as an introduction, Michael, you will talk about North America.
That's right. So many of you perhaps have heard about Gemini before. You've heard a little bit from Lars Michael today. There is this concept of the hub and spoke, and how do we make the loops more complementary to each other. But as Lars Michael also mentioned, for most of the US market, the ports are served directly. We don't really have the hub and spoke concept. We can't transship anywhere along the US coast, so we have to basically get here directly. And Gemini is more than just hub and spoke. And so tonight what we want to do is just drill down a little bit further to show you what really are we doing differently specifically for the trades to and from North America. And it's really these three things are very important. So first of all, we had to go on a diet. We said we can't call as many ports as we have. We have to reduce. And we've reduced the number of ports on parts of the network by as much as 30%. And by taking ports off the schedule, what we do is we take stress off the system. There's just fewer places where something can go wrong. The other thing we did is we said, well, we have to sail shorter distances. We know that there will be problems. We know that there will be places in different markets on the East Coast, the West Coast, the Gulf Coast, in Canada, where there will be delays. Weather is unpredictable. Shipping is just generally unpredictable. So we have to build enough buffer into our schedule so that we can wait when we need to. And by sailing every vessel has been designed to sail shorter distance than it does under 2M. And the last thing is that we are really leveraging our APM Terminals assets, not just the 9 hub ports we have around the world, but we have really important gateways in North America that will become critical for us going forward. Under 2M, we operated a split operation. Wherever we were calling 2 ports, one for MSC, one for Maersk. And that creates also additional drivers. If we don't want to go to a port, we have to ask permission, right? Or we have to find a way to compromise. Now, by consolidating at all of the APM terminals in key gateways like Newark, Los Angeles, Mobile, Lázaro Cárdenas, we basically give ourselves more control over our own destiny. We can now decide which ships come in. And we've gone to not only can we control more, we've made investments. As Lars Michael said, this is a project which started 5 years ago. We've invested more than $3 billion in building up infrastructure on hardware and software to be able to manage our terminals differently than we have in the past, increasing productivity, increasing the physical capacity of the terminals. So I'm going to drill down into some of the specific services, I think. Let's see. Yeah, so Asia to the US West Coast. So this will cycle through a little bit, and you'll see here. So what have we done with the US West Coast? We're going to operate 5 weekly services between Asia and the US West Coast. and we've reduced the number of ports on the network by 30%. So we've basically designed each string to call a finite number of ports and avoid duplication where it wasn't necessary. We will make use of modularity in Asia, and I'll show you a little bit about that. But this is really about using leaner loops, sailing shorter distances with each loop, and then when we get here to LA, 100% of the Gemini vessels call Pier 400. We control our own destiny. We decide what berth-west vessel comes in, which boxes move to rail as quick as possible. By concentrating all of our activity for rail only here in Los Angeles in one location, we now can run 3 trains a week out of Pier 400 to the entire US interior. Vancouver is something people have asked us about. So Vancouver is an area which has been delayed, and we want to use this opportunity. I mean, we're a bit open kimono here. We want you to know where are the things that we are concerned about and where are the things that work. And people have said to us, Vancouver is a concern. We see that there are delays in Vancouver. So what are you going to do about it? Now, the good news is we have found a way to bring that down. We're now berthing on arrival. We've, again, concentrated in one facility. We've seen improvements in the operations, but we're skeptical. And we'll stay skeptical because we don't know. It may come back, or we may encounter problems in other parts of the network. So that's where the modularity comes into effect. Modularity means basically that we can isolate any port on the network that's problematic by dedicating one string to it and taking it off all parallel strings. So today, as an example, we have one service that calls Tacoma in Vancouver, another calls Prince Rupert in Vancouver. If indeed Prince Rupert, or rather Vancouver, becomes a problem, we isolate Vancouver on one dedicated string and we handle all Prince Rupert and Tacoma on its own. And that way we maintain our service into Vancouver. We can continue to solve that. We can continue to offer that service, but we don't allow it to disrupt the rest of the network. So the odds are we're on the right track, but we're prepared for something to go off track and maintain 90% reliability. I'm going to switch to the Asia-US East Coast now, and modularity, as I mentioned, is something that we're going to use. So this is a demonstration showing our services from Laem Shebang to Newark. On the top section, you have the 2M network, and on the bottom section, you have the new Gemini network. So what happened in the past is that Laem Shebang was on one service that called multiple ports on its way to Newark. Anything that went wrong on the way between Laem Shebang and Newark made sure the Laem Shebang cargo was delayed. And there were a lot of problematic ports in between. In the future network, we run a dedicated shuttle between Laem Shebang and here, Tanjung Pelepas, where it connects to a service between Tanjung Pelepas and Newark. There's one other port. So we're basically taking off the likelihood that there could be a risk to delay these cargoes. And on one hand, that's good for the cargo from the main ports, but it's also good for some of the smaller ports. Because the reality is that when the schedule has a problem, the first port you cut is the small port. So let's say that, yes, we have a problem in Singapore and all the cargo is getting delayed, or we have a problem in Tanjung Pelepas. What happens is the next time we go a round voyage, we don't call Laem Shebang at all. And then we come to you and we say, oh, well, sorry, it's normally Monday, but this week it's going to be Thursday. Schedule's off, transit time's different, and we don't have as much space as we normally do. Now we take these ports and we said, here's a dedicated service so that this runs like clockwork and connects to the mainliner, and you don't have to worry about what happens in between. And we deliver on time. So that's one example of modularity that we use in Asia. We do the same on the US East Coast. So here on the US East Coast, we've taken all the smaller ports off, Tampa, New Orleans, Jacksonville, Miami, and we've put them on dedicated shuttles for Gemini exclusively between Cartagena and those ports. And again, the benefit is we know that there will be challenges on the US East Coast. We know that certain times we're going to have to wait. So now, if we do have to wait in Savannah, now we've given more time on the service to wait on a US East Coast port of the mainliner, and we can still cover all the other ports on a weekly basis without disrupting that service. Today, the reality is, if there's a delay in Savannah, we don't call Miami. If there's a delay in Houston, we don't call New Orleans. Now we take that off the equation. We give more time to those ports where we know it can be challenging. The US East Coast is a challenging market. It's a very important market. And at times we'll have to wait. So let's build a schedule that can account for that and is prepared for that and not thinking it's always going to be perfect, right? We've designed a service which is much more robust with less stress by isolating some ports that are smaller but still important. Two other things that we've done. Here again, we leverage APM Terminals. So Newark is the single largest gateway on the US East Coast. And we have our dedicated facility at APM Terminals Port Elizabeth that will house now 100% of the Gemini services, just like Pier 400. In the past, we operated again a split network. We were split between PNCT and Port Elizabeth. And we even used third ports from time to time. So now we say, okay, let's make sure that Gemini really works. Let's have the control over it, manage our own destiny, put it in one single location where we can control it. And we're now working on to see what else we can do in some of the other ports, like we're piloting a fixed berth window in Houston, but we don't know if that will work. So again, we've just built buffer into the schedule so that so if it doesn't work, we can still recover it. We've had people ask us about Lázaro Cárdenas. So we have two services between Asia and US East Coast that will go through the Panama Canal. And before they get to Panama Canal, they'll stop at APM Terminals in Lázaro Cárdenas and swap cargo between them. And we've had people come to us and say, oh, how confident are you in this port in Mexico? We've heard that there could be delays and so on. Yeah, we've heard that too. And so we've done a lot of work over the last year to improve that situation. So the first thing is there are fewer services calling Lázaro now. Gemini will be the dedicated services, 2 ships arriving at the same time every weekend, and working Saturday and Sunday exclusively in Lázaro Cárdenas. No other services calling that weekend. Not only that, the gates for the terminal will not operate on Sunday, just so that we can make sure yard utilization is maximized, that we're able to manage through the yard as quickly as possible, as best as possible. One of the main reasons for causing congestion in Lázaro Cárdenas in the past has been the import units coming into Mexico that stayed a long time on the terminal. So we've now expanded the footprint of the terminal, and we have 72,000 containers capacity right next to the terminal, where all the local boxes now will be held. So we can prepare before the next peak season inevitably comes. We now have more capacity to be able to operate the services confidently in Lázaro. And by doing that, by using Lázaro Cárdenas as a hub port to transship between these two services, side by side every weekend, transit times from Asia to the US East Coast are faster across the board. Europe to US East Coast, transatlantic. This is a situation where we've actually done something quite interesting, I think. Here we've taken 5 services, each we're calling 11 ports under 2M. We've changed it now to be 6 services, each calling 8 ports. So there you have an exact illustration of fewer ports on more vessels. So we're deploying more assets. We're putting more ships into the network, but we're asking each vessel to call fewer ports. We've also reduced the sailing distances. Every vessel will do 1,000 nautical miles less every year. That's savings in emissions. It's also increasing time that we have to wait outside any port that we need to. We also have now more ports that we're calling. So we've concentrated calls at Port Elizabeth again in Newark. In Port Elizabeth, will be dedicated in Gemini. So we're really trying to leverage our APM Terminals capacity to be able to manage this on our own. And we've added now direct services from places we never had it before. So we now have direct services out of Italy, Turkey, and into the UK. So more ships calling fewer ports, sailing fewer distances, gives more buffer into the schedule and more confidence that we can deliver at least 90% reliability. Because to be honest, 90% is the minimum we want to provide, not the maximum. And the minimum across the entire Gemini portfolio.
Can I just that's why I was standing up here. I just want to use this example here for Med US East Coast. There was in the animation, the previous one was actually US Gulf also to Mediterranean. And when we look here, this loop here for the East Coast goes to Italy, it goes to Genoa, it goes to Vado. The Gulf loop actually goes to the 2 Spanish ports. And they both meet in both directions down in Tangiers, which is one of the APMT hubs. So if there's a problem in Italy, Spain doesn't get impacted. If there's a problem in Spain, then Italy doesn't get impacted. So this is how we can actually create that thinking of the mainliner network into the whole execution of what we're doing. So this is actually, I know you said that we're not doing a lot of hub and spoke for North America, but this is actually a prime example, exactly what we're doing. We're using the different mainliner loops to actually feed each other, both to and from.
And we're leveraging APM terminals in both ends of the service, right? So we have Newark on the one hand, but we're also using it Tangier and in Northern Europe, right? So again, being able to concentrate our calls in more places where we are in control, we manage our own destiny. So this is a summary of just our transit times from Asia to the US East Coast. And as Lars said, one of the design principles we had to be was to say, well, we can't be so much slower than everyone else. We have chosen where we're going to be fast. And we've picked markets that were important to we think, to you. From what we see, they're important to you. We're going to be faster from Southeast Asia, from Vietnam, from South China, from Greater China. And that means we've had to deprioritize some other markets. But by doing so, we're delivering sometimes transit times that are the same as 2M, in other cases 5 days faster, but all at a much higher reliability than we ever could achieve under 2M. Yeah, and it has required a few compromises, but those are on our radar too, and to see how we can eventually expand the network even to make improvements in places where we're not as good as we'd like to be yet. Right, Lars, back to you.
Thank you. So delivering, as I said, we've been working on this for quite a number of years, and it actually goes beyond, how we design, how the schedules are. We've talked about how we've actually increased and made the investments into the terminals, both the gateways and also the hubs, to be able to serve what we're doing. But what we're making use of here is essentially that we have APM Terminals and we have Maersk Line or the ocean network together under the same roof. So we're actually trying now to bring these two parts of the company closer together and working together. That's a unique scenario that basically nobody else have. In the hubs, we are using pretty much the hubs 100% for Maersk and for the Gemini network, whereas on the gateways it's a combination. There's a lot of third-party customers as well. But as Michael was saying, in a place like Elizabeth and so on, we have a dedicated berth that is going to be serving Gemini. So, if a ship for one reason or the other is a bit delayed, we can move it around basically whichever way we need to twist and turn it. What we will see as well here is that what we says up here, collaboration in essence is critical to success. What we have done together, APMT and Ocean, is that we basically looked at our whole operating system. How do we make sure that issues that are impacting the customers are actually brought to the table so that we can find solutions? We can isolate the problems. We can we follow the ships. We actually have now a cadence where both locally, regionally, and also globally, that we have in some cases daily, but at least weekly engagements between the two. What is happening, what needs to be happening. For the first month here, we focused a lot on how do we phase in the ship. And I don't think in the many years I've been in this that I've ever been part of something that has been as detailed as what we have done here over the last month or so. We've designed systems together. We are now delivering visibility so that APMT can see what cargo is actually coming from Ocean. We can see that long time before they actually arrive to the terminals. And at the same time, as something new, Ocean can actually see where are we starting to hit some pressure points as far as terminal capacity is concerned. We have a much higher degree of forward-looking. So as I said, every week there is sessions. Okay, what is the next 8 week going to look like? What is the expectations? What are customers telling us? Is there a need to increase capacity from this location rather than this location? And then with the shuttles that we're operating, we actually have the possibility to shift around. For the next month, we need 8,000 TEUs to cover these ports. For the next month, we need 6,000 on this, and then the subsequent, maybe they will need to swap. So it delivers some flexibility for us. Co-location. We have a lot of people from APMT and from Ocean that are actually sitting together in the same locations. That makes that collaboration between them easier. Ocean guys can come to APMT and say, we have these boxes, they need to have a special treatment for this and that customer. What do we do about it? We have shared objectives. We want to deliver the reliability. We want to deliver the efficiencies. So we don't have those discussions between the terminal and Ocean on what is the right thing that we need to do. I have been in this game for many years, and when I was in Ocean, I thought as long as the ship gets to the terminal in time, the terminal takes care of the rest. Well, if we don't work closely together, it doesn't happen just like that. So when the ships are leaving the origin ports, immediately thereafter, the destination terminals, they can see what boxes are coming, where do they need to go to? Is it an inland move? Is it a rail move? Is it a transshipment move or whatever? And they start to plan the yard for that. And that we do when we're sitting together. So this is something that we have. We've had it for a number of years, but we are doing it now to a much larger extent than what we did in the past, be that at the gateways, but also in the hub terminals. Given the fact that I have responsibility for the hubs, I need to speak a little bit about the hubs. But just a few points here that we're doing, because this, what we're doing, particularly in an Asia-Europe market, for those of you who actually are running business there, we couldn't do that without a big investment. We're increasing our hub capacity in totality with about 30%. We're spending $3 billion to do that. We got the first approvals to do this 4 years ago, long before there was any announcements about 2M ending and all of that stuff, because we knew the direction that we were heading. We've also focused a lot, both on gateways, but certainly also in the hubs, on our productivity. So we're now actually able to get the ships through the terminals, through the hub terminals, with twice the speed that we did in 2016. And this is necessary because when you make the stops, when you make the connections, you want these connections to move fast. We've developed different technical solutions with new systems, ways of working with digital twins and so on, so that we can actually make better connections compared to what we did in the past. There's always been a lot of, hesitation around transshipment. It doesn't work, and the terminals are losing the boxes and all of that stuff. And I know I'm biased on this, but I also know that because I've been on the other side on Ocean, the vast majority of missed connections in the past is because the ships haven't come the way that they were planned to come. If a ship is supposed to come on a Tuesday to catch a ship on a Wednesday, it doesn't work if the ship only comes on Thursday. Then you miss the connection or you have 6 days. So a large part of what actually comes as a side gift of the higher reliability that we are solving for is that predictability on how we can actually connect the different parts of the network. Connectivity isn't just a question of, it's not just a question of ship to ship. You can say that a gateway terminal like Pier 400 is also a hub. It's a hub between the ocean and the land side. So this is what I said earlier about thinking the terminals into the network is super important. So when Michael says that we consolidate into Pier 400 and we consolidate into Elizabeth, it actually gives us the possibility to together between the terminals and ocean part to develop products for deliveries, faster deliveries when customers need that. We can keep the boxes if they need that and so on. But the main thing on a terminal, from my perspective, that I have learned in those 2.5 years by now that I've been with terminals, is that you need to keep the boxes going. So the best comparison I can make is that a terminal, be that a hub or gateway, is not a warehouse. It's a cross-dock. You need to get the boxes in, you need to get the boxes out, both for the benefit of the customers that actually needs to get their cargo or get it shipped. We shouldn't keep it for long. That's not what they're built for. And we can actually improve the efficiencies together when this is being done, both in terms of a better delivery of the boxes, but also a better throughput at the terminal. So this is really where, at the gateways, where land meet ocean. Technology. I'd have to say that this is maybe not my strongest expertise in what I'm talking about, but let me give it a go anyway. Because we've actually done a lot of work in connection with our various processes to upgrading on the use of technologies. everything from AI to digital twins on how we can estimate. As I said, when the ship are leaving Pelepas, as an example, we know at the destination, if the next destination is Newark, we can immediately, 4 weeks before the ship arrives, start to plan how we're actually going to operate in the yard. We have systems that in our hub terminals where we can basically say what is the most ideal sequence of the ships that are coming. We're following that, you can say daily, where we say, okay, this ship is a little late, this one is a little advanced. What is the most optimal sequence that they actually go alongside so that we safeguard the connections that we need to make. We also have another advantage that we will get from this here is in terms of the ships arriving on time, that we are able to translate into the end benefit for the customers. And that is actually when things are happening the way that they are planned to happen, and you don't have to redo all the time. You can say the efficiency as well as the smoothness of things will also happen. So a clear aim with this here is also that we don't get as many notices of changes as we have been doing in the past, because what we're solving for is to solve for the reliability. Now, let me finish on this one, because there's probably lots of questions in on this. So how is the transformation or the transition from 2M into Gemini going? We're 4 weeks into the game, and it's going to take a while, because the way we're doing it is that every week on every loop in Asia and for transatlantic in Europe, a ship phases out of 2M. Only when it's finished, it's discharged from 2M, and then the next week it starts its first loading on Gemini. So only when we get to the middle or the end of May will the last ship have left 2M. So far, it is running smooth in terms of our transition between. We have, as it says here, by end of last week, we had 250 Gemini calls, of which 96 are either on or ahead of pro forma. I checked in the latest on Pacific here this morning. So far, we have 26 ships leaving Asia that are leaving Asia on schedule. The first 13 of those are actually on the ocean on the way over here. The first ship arrived in at Pier 400 this morning, the Maersk Antares. It was unfortunately not on schedule. It was 54 minutes ahead of schedule. And for those that are going, and if anyone are going on, I believe it's Thursday, there'll be a TP8 coming in from North China as well. We will have a TP5 going into Tacoma tomorrow on schedule as well. So this is a start, but we also know that it's on us to actually prove to you guys that we can do this, not just because now it's great and we do it in the first couple of weeks and everybody takes pictures and it's so lovely. We're also going to do this on the 5th of November when it's raining and it's windy, and we're going to do it week in and week out. And that's really what we're setting up our different teams to do.
Yeah, so in closing, I think, can you put that back up for me? Yeah, so in closing, reliability for us is just a better way of doing business. We know that it will save us costs. We've heard from you that it's something that's important to you too. We do this because we believe that if we did this right, you'll be able to save money, that you'll be able to take advantage of opportunities from greater demand. And more importantly, you can spend more time focusing on your customers than wondering where are our ships and where are your boxes.
All right, we talk about Gemini and 90%. So does Gemini cover the entire Maersk universe?
Right, I didn't talk too much about that. So Gemini is very much focused on our East-West network. So it's Trans-Pacific, Transatlantic, Asia-Europe, Asia-Middle East, also Middle East and India to Europe. It does not include India to North America. It also doesn't include our North-South network. Those continue as they are today with the same partnerships. Over time, what we hope is that the learnings that we bring in from Gemini, we can potentially apply to the rest of our network so that we bring really everything up to a different standard.
Okay, so now I'll ask a tough question. I did say a tough question. What if we don't hit 90% reliability?
Yeah, that's a good one. So what if it doesn't work? So I think we won't be back here next year. But no, but I think
That's not true.
If it doesn't work, it's because something within the network is not working. And we can react very quickly to isolate it so that it doesn't pollute the rest. So it's about the system functioning, not one individual service or one individual port.
No, but that's exactly it. And it goes beyond, as I said, it goes beyond designing the loops and designing the network. It's the whole mentality on which we actually execute on it. And there's been a lot of training sessions, there's been a lot of, how can I say, development of how we want to do. We are developing contingency handbooks. If there is a problem in one terminal, as you say, we can isolate the problem. What we're doing is essentially, as Mike was saying, we're looking at the entire system rather than the individual. And yes, then in some cases it means that an individual situation comes out a bit worse than what it otherwise would have done. But by protecting the overall, we do believe that we're actually acting in the best interest of the majority.
The average delay we see is 6 days today globally, the average. So we know that and that's for the entire industry, not Maersk. The entire industry has an average of 6 days delay. So we know that there's more, we know that there's less, but that sounds very expensive to us. We believe many of our customers are carrying much more inventory than they probably want to. And we want to be part of making it better. Thanks again for joining us tonight. It's been very interesting to have you all here. We appreciate it. We're going to be here all week, 2 shows a day. We are going to be here all week and meeting with many of you, so we're happy to expand on some of the things we talked about and make some of this available. So thank you again very much.
Thanks for coming out. Enjoy your evening. Have a great TPM. Thanks, everyone.